right, when you think of the Victorian era, what pops into your head? Probably black and white photos, stuffy manners, maybe Sherlock Holmes stalking through a foggy London. It all feels very proper, right? Disciplined, buttoned up. But let's be real. Behind all that prim and proper window dressing was a world of secrets, brutal power plays, and a whole lot of quiet suffering. Society demanded that its women be perfect angels in the house, these delicate creatures who supposedly had no desires of their own. The reality, though? The stuff they actually wrote down in their secret diaries and whispered in court? That's a story of flesh and blood, of survival against all odds. We're not just looking at history today. We're peeling back the covers on the Victorian marriage bed, literally. So get ready, because what you're about to hear is intense. So picture this. You're young. You're trying to flirt. But one wrong move, one glance held a second too long, and your entire future is toast. That was Victorian courtship. It wasn't a romance. It was a public performance where a girl's virginity was her main selling point. So, how did they get around this? How did people express actual messy human desire? They developed a brilliant little hack. The language of flowers. Seriously. A simple bouquet wasn't just a nice gift. It was a coded text message. Sending red carnations meant, "My heart aches for you." A bit of honeysuckle whispered, "I am bound to you." This was basically the Victorian version of sliding into someone's DMs, but way more elegant, and with infinitely higher stakes. It was a tiny rebellion using petals and stems. But all that romantic spy work with flowers, it usually ended the second she said, "I do." Because for most women, marriage wasn't the start of a new life. It was the end of her legal one. There was this wild legal concept called coverture, and wild is putting it mildly. Basically, the moment a woman got married, she legally vanished. Poof. She was no longer a person in the eyes of the law. She was his property. Not in a cute, "Oh, honey, you belong to me" kind of way. No, like property. Like his pocket watch or his horse. Her money was his money, the house was his, even her body was legally his. The famous Judge William Blackstone spelled it out with zero chill, saying a woman's very being or legal existence is suspended during marriage. She was a ghost in her own home, and that complete erasure of her as a person, it created the perfect environment for absolute tyranny. And this is where things get really dark. Let's talk about the marital bed. Victorian society had this insane double standard. A woman's job was to be pure, passionless, basically a beautiful living statue. Meanwhile, the men? Oh, they were expected to get around. Visiting brothels, keeping mistresses. It was all part of the gentleman's experience. And this hypocrisy wasn't just unfair. It was a killer. Men would bring home diseases like syphilis and gonorrhea and give them to their pure wives. The marriage bed, this supposed sanctuary, became a death trap. Women would suffer through miscarriages, stillbirths, and chronic pain, all while being told by the family doctor, who was always loyal to the husband, that she was just being hysterical. Just imagine that for a second. Your body is falling apart because of his secrets, and the doctor tells you the problem's all in your head. It gets worse. There was a grotesque, horrifying myth that a man could cure himself of syphilis by sleeping with a virgin. This led to the rape of countless young girls, sometimes even children, by men desperate to cleanse themselves. It's monstrous. And that sense of total ownership didn't stop with disease. If a wife was property, her husband felt he had the right to correct her. You've probably heard the phrase rule of thumb. Well, it's believed to come from a real, horrifying piece of English law that said a man could legally beat his wife with a stick as long as it was no thicker than his thumb. A man's home was his kingdom, and he could do whatever he wanted inside it, and no one would step in. So with nowhere to go and no one to tell, what did these women do? They wrote. Secret diaries became their only escape, and these weren't just "Dear Diary, the vicar came for tea" entries. These were crime scene reports, testimonies from a war nobody else could see, filled with raw accounts of bruises, of fear, of utter despair. The simple act of writing was a rebellion, but a dangerous one. If her diary was found, it could be used in court to prove she was insane or immoral. And I know what you're probably thinking. Why didn't they just leave? The horrifyingly simple answer is the system was designed to be a cage. Getting a divorce was basically impossible for a woman. Before 1857, it took an entire act of parliament, something only the super-rich could even attempt. Even after the law changed, it was a rigged game. A man could divorce his wife for cheating, period. But a wife? She had to prove he was cheating and being incredibly cruel, or had committed some other crime like incest or bigamy. How do you prove that when the law, the doctors, and all of society are already on his side? You couldn't. So let's recap. The law won't help you. Society won't believe you. Your husband owns you, your body, and your future. What's left? For a surprising number of women, the answer was in the kitchen. Poison. It was the ultimate weapon of the powerless. It was silent, it was subtle, and it could be delivered in a cup of tea by the very angel who was supposed to be caring for him. Arsenic was a favorite. It was cheap, easy to get in things like flypaper, and its symptoms looked a lot like food poisoning or cholera. They even had a nickname for it: the inheritance powder. The infamous Mary Ann Cotton, a serial killer who may have murdered up to 21 people, including her own mother and multiple husbands, was an expert with an arsenic-laced teapot. But it wasn't always about insurance money. Sometimes it was just the end of the line. A final, desperate act of revenge from a woman who had been pushed too far. In a world that had taken everything from her, a spoonful of poison was the last terrifying piece of power she had. It's easy to look back at all this and think, wow, thank God we're not them. But here's the final, unsettling question. How much has really changed? The corsets are gone, sure, and the laws are different. But the ghosts of control, hypocrisy, and silence, they're still with us. The darkest secrets of the past are never truly buried. They just wait for us to find the courage to look them right in the eye.